Hey, what's going on, fam? Welcome to the Creative Comeback Podcast. I am a lot of things in life. I am a husband, I am a father, I am a photographer, I am a creative, and I am a filmmaker, and I also dabble in YouTube. I am super pumped that you are here listening to this podcast today, and I want to go ahead and tell you that I am obsessed with failure and how creatives overcome failure to find success on the other side of it. Now, if you're here listening today, I want to encourage you to join my Facebook group called The Creative Comeback as well. And there you will find more creatives sharing and exploring failure, creativity, and finding some level of success. This is what this podcast is all about. We are going to talk about a lot of different things in this podcast, but we are going to talk with so many different creatives from all across the world, sharing their life experiences, sharing where they fail, sharing what success means, and sharing what life is on the other side of creativity. I'm pumped that you're here today. We are going to get started with this episode right now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Tim Riddick. I am a full-time creative based out of the Washington, D.C. area. I have been a full-time wedding photographer for the last 11 years, and over the last 4 years, I've worked on a personal project called The 50, which is a survey of interracial relationships based on the 50th anniversary of the Supreme Court case Loving v. Virginia. The other thing, I also used to work at DreamWorks Studios as an assistant film editor in another life. But I have been doing photographing weddings and families and podcasting. I've got a couple of different podcasts that I also run in a small podcast company called The Morning Tea, and I have about three different podcasts, with the fourth one dropping in April, and the next one that we're getting ready to drop next month is actually called Half and Half, and that should be a really fun thing. But I'm rambling about myself. I actually want to talk to you guys about my friend TJ. I'm going to call you Tyler, but I'm going to start off with like how we met. I met TJ, sure, also Tyler, about 5 years ago at a photography conference, and we ended up going out to like lunch or dinner with some other creatives and just really kind of hit it off. And one of the things that I think is really unique just about photographers and just creatives in general is how they rebrand and how that process kind of went. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to dig into Tyler, but I'm going to let Tyler introduce himself. I know you're going to realize that he does have a little bit of an accent there. I can hear it. I know you probably can too. So Tyler, why don't you tell everyone where you're from?
Oh, come on.
Yeah, dude, I can hear it, man. I can hear it. Like, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone where you're from and kind of what you do?
I don't think I've said A yet. So come on. You don't hear an accent, do you?
I could hear it. I could literally hear it a little bit.
I am from Toronto. Oh, okay. No, I'm Tyler. I am born and raised in Toronto, Canada. That's in Ontario. Yeah, I've been a photographer for about 15 years now. Basically started in photography 101 in high school. I'll keep it short. But essentially, yeah, photography 101 in high school, old black and white, developing in the darkroom, and just fell in love. I think when you know, it's a beautiful feeling and to discover developing film in the darkroom. So that's what hooked me. At the time I was heavily into skateboarding. So, but I was not pursuing a career in skateboarding because I was not good enough. So, I turned to the camera. And instead of focusing on skateboarding, I focused on photographing skateboarding. It was just a natural progression. My friends got better. My friends got sponsored. My friends started traveling, and I just basically tagged along. That hobby and interest turned into a full-blown career at like 19 years old. It was well, actually maybe earlier, like 18, I was traveling and shooting content for magazines and companies. And yeah, I mean, heck, living the dream as a teenager, right? So
Yeah.
that kind of progressed. I ended up working full time with Element and Billabong, shooting content on the Canadian side, not the American side. And then that slowly transitioned. I mean, I just kind of got tired of living in a van with 8 other dudes and, motels. And it's if you love the life, you love the life. But I mean, I had a girlfriend, a serious girlfriend, and I was about to propose. So, the into weddings, kind of progressed. I essentially started looking for a wedding photographer for my wedding, and then realized, hey, you can make money doing this. So, yeah, basically piggybacked off my wedding photographer, asked him a boatload of questions, and then basically just made the decision. I'm going to transition and I'm going to shoot weddings. So that was that. That was 2012, I believe, maybe earlier. Maybe even earlier, but essentially that's when I started as a wedding photographer, and that progressed. Got busy. My first season, I shot 2 weddings. The next season was, 17, 18, and then from there, it's been basically 30 to 40 every year. So, yeah, definitely, I consider myself a full-time creative and full-time wedding photographer. I worked under a company name. It's embarrassing, but it was it's hilarious to look back on. Tim, do you know Lupe Fiasco?
Yeah, I love Lupe.
Do you know the song? You know the song "Kick Push"?
I knew that was coming. I knew.
Yeah.
Deep down inside, I knew that was coming.
So my actual business is K Push Studios Incorporated. So
Oh, get out of here! That's hilarious.
So that's how I started K Push Studios. I thought it was clever to mold skateboarding and wedding photography together, but and then I basically transitioned in 2015. I grew up a little bit and branded over to my name, TJ Tindale. That's basically how everyone knows me. And rode that wave. That's where I think my photography career, if you will, really took off. And and that was a big, like, 2015, 2016 was the start of being a quote unquote destination wedding photographer. So I chased that dream, traveled a lot over the, course of 2 years, and then bought a house and had a child and kind of settled down. And now brought me to now. And basically I have 2 kids. I live in a small town outside of Toronto. And I think that's kind of where the rebrand really started to structure. My life was different. And I mean, my business has always emulated my life. I think that's something people have pointed out through the years, and I've come to accept that I loved skateboarding. I photographed skateboarding. I loved weddings. I photographed weddings. And now I'm definitely still shooting weddings, but my focus is families and shooting family photography on film.
Yeah.
I mean, and that had a lot to do with COVID, and I don't want to bring COVID into the conversation, but definitely, just adapt or die. And I saw the need for family photography, and all my wedding clients were having kids. And
it's definitely
and I was in that mindset. Like, I wasn't afraid of kids. I have 2 of my own. So that was an easy transition. And then bringing the passion of film into that and saying, like, okay, families on film, that's it. That's how I'm branding it. That was kind of the transition. So that kind of took me into the start of my rebrand. And just kind of getting my head wrapped around that.
Yeah. So this is one of the things this is one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of have you on and kind of talk about it, because it's not often that you hear a photographer come from skateboarding to to weddings.
Yeah.
It's such a unique transition. So like you were already kind of rebranding. You've been, it feels like over the last, several years since you were 18 or 19, in a state of changing and evolving, not just as a photographer, but also as a person, right? Like you were doing like this wild, like traveling all over the country, photographing skateboarding events and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm going to get married. I'm going to move into weddings. Did you find that going from skateboarding to photographing weddings, which are totally two unique aspects of subject matter, did you find like shooting skateboarding kind of help influence kind of how you photograph weddings? I know they're different, but like you do different things and photograph in different ways. So like did any of that influence how you shot weddings?
Well, like, yes, directly. When I really, like, when I initially got into wedding photography, I mean, basically with skateboarding, it's a lot of flash photography, right? So you're essentially underexposing your ambient light and lighting your subject, the skateboarder, with flash to freeze the trick. So I kind of just, that's what I knew, and that's how I knew how to shoot. So that's what I brought to weddings. I brought, speed lights, 3 or 4 of them. I would, I did a lot of, what do you call it? Conceptuals, like, bridal parties where I would light each person differently and then go into Photoshop and like slap them all into this. So it was all, is that what it's called?
Yeah. They're exactly what they're called. They're, I think there's like a, you see that style often in like big magazines.
Yeah. So I was like doing that, I like a really punchy color, cause that's like with skateboarding, I initially was shooting film on skateboarding, but it was all slide film. So it was like Velvia and stuff like that. So it was very punchy. So that's where so definitely like my skateboarding, and it was essentially like what I knew, right? Like I knew how to shoot that way. So that's how I shot weddings. Why I transitioned to weddings, like, honestly, it was money. Like, I needed to pay a mortgage or pay my rent. We got a condo, and it's like, you got to do what you got to do. So, I mean, to get into weddings was not like a passion of like, that passion developed over time, which I would say is probably I don't think many people get into wedding photography because they love weddings. Like,
I think, I think it kind of is probably a little bit of both. And because I do know, like, when I shot my first wedding, this was like me coming off of getting laid off at DreamWorks Studios during the last economic downturn. And I was like, I went back to bartending because that's kind of what I knew, and that was what I was comfortable with as well. I bartended all throughout college. And then I had like a friend ask on like Halloween. He was like, hey, bro, you always have a camera with you. Will you shoot our wedding? And I was like, oh, dude, hell no. Like, that's not what I want to be. I'm a photojournalist. That's what I majored in college. And I was just kind of like, that's just not what I wanted to do. But he convinced me to like photograph his wedding. And I was like, well, I'm not going to let you pay me. Like, so he did pay me with a case of beer, but it was like, but that was just kind of like one of the things where I kind of fell into it. And I thought like my perception of what weddings were like drastically different than anything. I thought like the perception of weddings were like more like what my parents' wedding photos look like very stage and posy. And this wedding that I shot was so wild. Like the groom dressed up as Captain Planet and the bride dressed up as like the Bride of Chucky. And that's how they got married.
Wow.
And it was so wild. And I had so much fun that I was like, okay, I think this is something I want to pursue. And it was just kind of like one of those things where it was same thing with you. It was just like a natural progression. It wasn't something that like I was like, oh my gosh, I just love, which it sounds weird. Which I do, but like it wasn't
Classic.
Yeah, it wasn't definitely what I wanted to do. So like and I kind of fell into it and I enjoyed it and the money was great, and that's the thing is that the thing was this, and I'm sure you probably felt the same way as you kind of got into it. It's like once people start to trust your vision, then they kind of let you do what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't want to speak highly of myself, but I feel that I am a very driven person. So, and when I have a goal, like, it has to get done or else it drives me crazy. So, uh, when I started weddings and, transitioned from skateboarding, it was essentially like just, I'm going to be a wedding photographer. It wasn't like a friend was like, "Hey, can you shoot my wedding?" It was, I had never shot a wedding before, but I said, I need to pay my bills. I need to make money. So I'm going to shoot weddings. And so I chased that. Right.
Yeah.
And, that I just basically, I remember having a conversation with like my buddy who is a videographer. And I said, "Do you want to team up with me? Like, let's build a company together." And we had never done it before, but we were like, let's build a company. Let's shoot the way we shoot skateboarding and let's do that. And so that's
Yeah.
what we did. And it was just like, we just jumped in and, booked, like I said, 2 weddings and then like, 17 the next year. And then from there it was, it was a natural progression. I don't have like a story where it was like my first year I shot 40 weddings. Like, no, it was a lot of hustle and it was a
Yeah.
lot of hard work and we it was a slow growth, like, but it was good because it really got us into the mindset of like, work hard and put in the time and it paid off. He ended up hating weddings after 2 or 3 years and I stuck with it. I really enjoyed it. And I mean, I always like, I don't know if you're the same, but people always ask, "Do you love weddings? Do you love wedding photography?" And I do love weddings and photographing weddings. But I think what I always kind of explain to people is I love the lifestyle that it provides.
Yeah.
It provides a stable income. And I'm not gonna scream like 6 figures, how to be a 6-figure photographer. Like that's never been my drive. It's been put food on the table, pay my bills and save money. And, if we can make a good living doing it, then we can make a good living doing it. But it's always just been, the lifestyle. I'm home with my kids. I traveled the world with my wife basically shooting weddings. Like, it paid for us to go around the world. Like, I'm using my career to take advantage of the way I live my life. It's, and I one day I might not shoot weddings, but I'll be happy with the way that I decided to utilize what wedding photography can do for you, as a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, that was kind of piggybacking off of what you're saying that is true. Like the lifestyle, I've told people this before. If you've listened to this and you kind of jumped into this room, like my parents are very driven people and worked like my dad. My dad was a doctor and my mom was a social worker, and they had crazy hours. Like my dad was like hardly ever around when I was growing up as a kid, and I don't mean that like in a negative way. Obviously, my dad was going to do whatever it took to provide for the family with the skill set that he had, but that wasn't a lifestyle necessarily that I wanted to live. And I think that was definitely something that was like a driving, motivating factor for the choices that I made. Maybe not initially. Maybe there's like some choices that I made that kind of led to this that I was kind of unaware of. But there were choices that like, man, I want to be able to be home when I want to be home and be my, like, I don't want to say be my own boss, but like that was kind of a motivating factor that I was going to have a better relationship with my kids than what my dad had with us when I was growing up. And that's not like a bad thing. I don't think that I think what we do is when we are children, we learn from what we see and what's modeled at home. And I think anytime, you can make a life choice or a life decision as whatever you're doing. If you want to be an author or a musician, that you can bring your kids along and bring your family along to like events that you are photographing. Like, I will say this, like I photographed the wedding. Obviously, I had more elopements last year, but 2 years ago, I shot a wedding in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and I brought my wife with me, and I didn't make a dime. Well, I did. I was paid, but I didn't like everything that I was paid went into this like trip with my wife, and it was just her and
Yeah.
I, and my in-laws were watching my kids, and it was just the best time, you know. And I will even say this: like when we were both speaking at that conference, and I was in Vancouver, and I had never
Yeah.
at that point in time, I had never been to Canada before that trip, and it was. Dude, I was so engrossed with like just walking the streets and photographing things. And I would go back to
Yeah.
my Airbnb and I'd be like, man, you know what? I just really don't want to do this alone anymore. You know,
Yeah.
traveling all around the world, like photographing events and photographing weddings and doing a lot of big things. And there's this is going to sound super silly. There's this song by John Mayer. It's I don't even know if it made it to his album, but one of his albums, but it was like 3x5, and he's pretty much talking about like traveling the country and looking at things through a photograph. Like the only thing that you have left to show someone is the photograph, the experience the person has missed out on. And I was like, you know, that's not something I really kind of wanted to do. So as I kind of was just making some changes just within my business. Now I haven't rebranded, but like as I was making some changes, it was just kind of I kind of want to shoot closer to home instead of going to the other side of the country or going to another country to photograph, which was great. It's great. But now as, you know, kids with playing sports and stuff like that, I don't
Yeah.
want to miss out on that either. So it's just kind of, anyway, I'm digressing here. I do have this question for you. And I
Sure.
think this is something that is, it will be interesting for people that are like sitting in the room. Like when you were
Okay.
going through this rebranding process. So when we met, you were shooting
Yeah.
solely Fuji. I'm sure you're probably still tinkering with film a little bit here or there, but you were a Fuji film shooter at that point in time. And now you have
Yeah.
made this transition to photographing almost solely on film. And by the way, I do need to say this. If you guys have not checked out Tyler's new website, it is absolutely gorgeous. And I love everything, like
Oh, thanks, man.
everything about it, dude. I was like on it earlier today, and I was on it a couple days ago, and I was just kind of like, just everything that I saw visually, everything that I saw, like what I was reading about your why and about what's important, just really just screams out from your website. And it tells a little bit
Awesome.
about yourself. And I think that was a really unique way of rebranding. It kind of felt more like you were, it was like part outdoor company, part family, part wedding photographer. It was a lot of different things that you just don't really
Yeah.
see in wedding websites. And the copy, I feel like, and what I mean by copy, I'm talking about the, you know, the writing on your website. It didn't feel as if you were keyword stuffing things, and you were really just being honest about yourself and about who you are as a person, about why you chose the things that you chose. But I'm really interested in hearing the process from switching from solely Fuji film to shooting primarily film now.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely want to dive into like your compliment about my website and how it got to that point. I think that's really important if we're going to talk about branding.
Yeah, let's do it.
But I'll answer your first question. Going from Fujifilm cameras, like the X series cameras, to film. That was film. Film for me was, so shooting skateboarding, like 80% of it was shot on film. I had a Bronica or Bernica, however you want to say it, SQA square 6x6 format with a fisheye, and that's what I shot most of my skateboarding work with.
Yeah.
So film was the start, right? Like, and it was, you know, ingrained in me, and I loved it. And then essentially, you know, obviously weddings took over, and digital was the, you know, it's the tool. So I shot digital, and then, you know, I got into Fuji because in 2016, when my wife and I had a bunch of weddings abroad, and the X Pro 2 just came out, and I was switching from Canon to Nikon. But instead of buying 2 Nikon bodies, I bought 1 Nikon body, and then I bought the X Pro 2 and a lens. And it was super interesting because we were gone for probably 4 months. All my work shooting on that trip, I honestly can tell you I did not pick up my Nikon once. And so when I got home, I sold the Nikons and I went purely on Fuji. And I mean, yes, the grain structure is different, and the ISO capabilities were not as good, but I mean, I'm all about feel. I've always been about feel. I've not been like a gear person. So for me, it was like, this works. I like the way it feels. I like the way it looks. I like the conversations it provides at weddings. People think, it's interesting. So I ran with that. And that's how I basically shot Fuji for the past 5 years. I guess, 5 years, whenever the X Pro 2 came out. So, but to that, digital was, everybody gets creative burnout, and shooting wedding after wedding after wedding on digital and editing, I said, I needed an outlet. So it's funny, the film camera that I buy is the most coveted film camera you can buy. I bought a Leica M6.
Yeah.
But I found it on locally for $2,000 with a lens, and I was like, I didn't know at the time that was a steal, but I was like,
that is a steal today. That's a big steal.
Yeah, that's a big steal. But I mean, buying a $2,000 film camera as a hobby is not a practical thing to do. But again, I'm all about feel. So I was like, I want rangefinder. I want Leica. I want that feel. I want to know what it's like. Everybody talks about Leica and how it's all about, the way it makes you feel. And I wanted that. So I did it. I jumped it. And so that kind of kicked off film for me. That was 2 years ago. And I started, bringing it to weddings and dabbling with it. And then, film just takes over. It takes over your heart. And I essentially just started shooting more and more film personally, definitely. But then it started bleeding into my work. And, that's 2 years ago. And pretty much now I'm shooting 20 to 30 rolls at a wedding. And then, I have the Contact 645, and I basically dove in to shoot, film as much as I can. I mean, it's super impractical and expensive, and economically it's not smart, but I think it has a lot to do with the way my brand feels now and how it's progressed. So, I just I've stuck with it. So,
and I want to kind of talk about that and some of the design decisions that you made along the way, since I think the one thing that I really love about your branding, in its simplicity, it's also complex. And I think when you jump onto your website and I see the TT and then I see photography company, it feels like kind of what I was talking about earlier. It almost feels like a outdoor brand. It's because it's like also like pictures of a video. It's not just pictures, it's video right when you hit your website of you doing things. So often what I see from other photographers and from what other creatives when they build their websites, it's about their clients. It's not necessarily about them. And your work is really it's a reflection of who you are, and that kind of screams through your website. And the thing that I liked about the most, and I want to kind of have you talk about this, if this was intentional or not, but your branding, it felt like shooting film and the way that it was branded, like almost as if it was like being handcrafted. And that's kind of what I think about when I think of someone who shoots with film primarily, as I'm a primarily film shooter as well. So was that part of the thought process when you were kind of rebranding?
Yeah. So I have so I'll say this first. I think when I approached my rebrand about 6 months ago, I ended up working with, he's a friend, but he owns an agency. So I think that's step number one. I think definitely I'm going to call it an investment. It was not a cheap process, but it was a process that is going to pay for itself year after year while I roll out this brand. I think as creatives, as a photographer, we scream from the mountains, pay for good photography, pay for good photography. And then it comes to, ourselves, and we, design our own website, create our own logo, pay, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, just the way that I wanted to go about my brand and I wanted to start from ground zero. And so, with that decision, I decided to bring in a professional because my biggest thing was I didn't want to just create another website with a new logo.
Yeah.
And the same work. My number one goal was I wanted to have a foundation. And the only way you can create a foundation is by, starting from the beginning and, that why. And I pulled up my brand deck because it's 43 pages.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And I mean, this is all his work, right? Like, this is what you pay for. And this is what I wanted to pay for. I mean, yes, you get a logo at the end of it. And yes, I'm going to roll out really nice looking PDFs and print material and business cards. But what I paid him is for him to take everything in my brain and me dump it on him, and then him create something from that, and us work together on a common goal, to create a brand foundation. And I'm just going to pull up here, he said how the brand should feel: quality, honest, timelessness, and smart. So with quality, it's about product, service, and lifestyle. With honest, it's kind, approachable, and transparent. Timeless is authentic, candid, film, and memorable. And smart, approach your brand smart, attractive, and desirable. So, I mean, I surf, I skateboard. I'm not a high-end person, but I wanted to create, an authentic high-end brand, but I still wanted it to reflect who I am. And it was really taking those two things, those two worlds and bringing them together. And he created a whole mood board for me. And in the mood board, it's got it has a surfboard, but it's, a beautiful wooden craft surfboard. Yeah. It has, an old 911 Porsche. I love cars. It has a M6. It has, scotch, a leg of woolen scotch. It has, branding of and I'm literally looking at it here. And then he's bringing in those green tones from my work, and he's pulling in different logos and butcher shop. There's a butcher shop, and instead of it just handing them the meat, it's they package it really nicely in craft paper. And so he's taken all my ideas and then basically said, here's the tone of what we're going to roll out. And this is all before logo and concept. And it's who are you and who do you want to be in your brand? And let's find that out first. And then we'll go with the fun stuff, And that's what I honestly, discussing it with my wife and deciding whether this was the investment that we wanted to make on my business, it honestly just came down to, I need someone to take everything I have in my brain and create a foundation so that when I build my website, when we do our logo, when I build out print material, all the whole client experience, it all has to start from the brand foundation. And everything that I've done up until this point just goes back to quality, honest, timelessness, and smart. And so I think having that anchor helps you to then roll out a website that actually makes sense. And it's really cool to hear you kind of say the things that you've said about my website and about the brand, because, and I've heard it from a lot of different people, and honestly, you're in your brain so much, right? Yeah. You're going through this process. You're you're not alone, but you are alone. Like, you know, I did build my own website. Like, I used Flow themes and I did do it myself, but always going back to the brand foundation and like, does what I'm writing express what I initially wanted to convey, and do my photos fit the way I want people to see my work? Like, every time I would do something, I would go back to the brand foundation and that was the whole point. And then to roll it all out, and then to hear people say, like, I had someone, you know, and I didn't, you know, I didn't date anyone, but you know, I had a friend of mine look through my website prior to me launching it, and someone I respect highly. I highly respect her, and you know, she said words to me: "You're approachable with a high-end feel." And I was like, that is exactly what I wanted. And for her to say that, you know, and I mean, again, I'm not totally high-end. I'm not going after the luxury market, but just, you know, to have that feel, you know, but essentially, you know, it's just interesting to hear people go through my work and go through the brand, and then, you know, yell out those keywords that I started with, you know, 6 months ago. It's a really a good feeling to know that the work that my buddy who worked with me on it, like, to put in all this hard work and to make sure I'm doing things the right way, and to keep questioning myself and questioning, is it the right way? Is it? And then to hear those words of affirmation, you know, I find that to be a good success story, and a pat on my back to know that, like, I took the right route to, you know, to go about this.
Yeah, I think that is, I think the thing that a lot of us, when I'm lumping all of us, just creatives in general, really kind of fail to look at. We don't even know how to really properly define our work. And I posted this, either on Facebook or Instagram, I can't remember. I posted it somewhere. I was like, people really need to move away from describing their work as light and airy and dark and moody.
Yeah.
I think because there's so much other adjectives that we can use to define not just our work, but who we are as people. Like, light and airy means nothing to me. Like, if I was like, and what I mean by that is that's like, just like you're trying to get the film look without actually shooting film. That's kind of what light and airy in my head means to me, but that doesn't tell me anything of you as the person, or what your core principles are, or what you want clients to think of you as. And I think this is the thing. Like, obviously I had no clue about your how in depth your rebranding kind of went. And I was just kind of like, as I was just kind of like looking at your website, and I watched your video on your About Me page, and I read the words that were on your page, and I looked at the blog post that you had, and I went back and I was like thoroughly kind of like, man, I was like looking at your blog post, and I was just kind of getting lost in how great the work was. And I think, as I'm like kind of thinking here, I was just kind of like, I'm sitting here with my notes in front of me. I was like writing things that spoke to me as we were getting ready to have this talk and to record this, like, also for my podcast. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, man, like, this is like, to me, like, what a good, I don't even say good, what a great rebrand looks like. And I think the other thing that was really unique, because we were going back and forth on Instagram, and I asked you, I was like, man, I was like going back, and I realized that you had also, in this rebrand, had archived or deleted all of your previous work. As well.
That was a huge point of contention with a lot of people. When I told people, I'm like, I'm gonna delete, because I am the type of person that is like fresh start. Like, I needed to start from the beginning, and that started with the rebrand and working with somebody. But then when it came to like the website, like, it was like, no, I'm not going to build off of the website I have. I'm building a brand new website. And my Instagram, I was like, I'm going to do it right this time. Like, you know, I'm scheduling out all my posts. I'm gridding it and curating it. And I mean, hopefully I stick with it. But like,
Yeah.
these were all things that I was like, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it right. And I got to do it, you know, methodically and think about it and make decisions and plan ahead, and not just, I always ran my business very much like, oh, it's 5:30. Shoot, I should post a photo now. And like, you know, and I'm sure 90% of us are like that. But I just thought, you know what, Monday mornings, I'm going to create a grid for the whole week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to color coordinate it. I'm going to make sure it fits. And, you know, it's starting to roll out, and it's going to take time to kind of build that. But, you know, it goes to it goes back to, you know, what you said about the website and the video and the words. And, you know, when I made the video, I basically told the guy that was going to do it for me. He's a super talented wedding videographer, but then also he does a lot of documentary stuff. But I said, I do not want this video about, like, I don't want it theatrical. Like, I do not want, you know, a drone flying over with epic music, me photographing a couple. Like, I don't care about that. Like, what I want people to know is who I am, what I stand for. And if they like that, then we can move forward. And so what I told him was, I want it to be a surf documentary, like not an actual surf. It's funny that surf is involved, but I wanted it raw. I wanted it real, and I wanted it to feel, you know, natural. And so when people watch it, they actually can, you know, get an idea of who I am, so that, you know, I'm basically kind of cutting all the corners off, so that when I get that email in and that inquiry in, it's almost like they're ready to book. And you know, this isn't, you know, I'm not trying to gloat, but, you know, I had 4 inquiries come on over the weekend, and, you know, I booked 3 of them, and that's purely based on. And when I rebranded, that was like my number one goal. Was like, I want to eliminate all the questions. And I mean, yes, people still have questions, but I like what you stand for. I like what you do. Are you available? And I mean, that's only a very like micro example. And this is the beginning of it. Like, it's not always going to be like that, but it's just another, you know, form of affirmation that, like, I'm doing the right things and I'm taking the right steps to get to where 6 months ago I said I want to be there, and I'm starting to see myself actually where I wanted to be. So yeah,
I absolutely love that, because it's almost like a combination of not only rebranding but also reinventing yourself. Like,
totally.
And it's not to say that these aren't the things that were probably on your website prior to, or that these things weren't important to you back then. It was just like, I always kind of feel like as photographers and as creatives, we kind of separate our personal life away from our client life, you know, or the work, you know, so they're not things that live harmoniously together. They are, but they're 2 separate things, but they don't necessarily have to be, you know. And I think the thing is, this is like, I love when you said, I wanted to take all the questions away prior to that. They were almost ready to book because they already understand who I am. They've gotten a glimpse of my process. And sometimes it's really difficult to see that process just with written words. And I think that the thing that I really love is not only just the video and it's like you and your family, it's less about clients and more about you. Even from the very first part, when you get into your website, ideally what you're doing is like, yes, you are a photographer by trade, but you are way more than just that. And I think that is what I absolutely like. I mean, I feel like I'm fanboying over your website. I am. Because I'm slightly jealous because it's just so creative and so clean, and I love everything about it. I love even the work that you have up on the website. And I know, like, I was like, kind of piggybacking off of like what you're doing. I was like going all the way back to like, I think it was like 2011 or 2010, whenever I first got on Instagram. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, dude, why are these things even still on here? And then on top of that, I was like, I've forgotten about a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So it was kind of nice. Like I'm trying to go back year by year and curating my work and using Instagram more as a gallery,
Yeah.
less about random things, So I really enjoy that. What I do, so I have this question, and the question
Hmm.
that I have for you is like when you were going through your rebrand,
Hmm.
um, how I always like to ask this because like you're married, and did your wife speak into it at all? Did she have like some suggestions and
Oh
um,
gosh, yeah.
yeah, I'm always curious because like I think more often than not when we think of photographers, we think of the person, but we don't think about the team that it takes to actually
Yeah.
do what we want to do.
No, definitely. And I mean, gosh, yeah, she got so tired of me talking about the same stuff over and over again. But I mean, she's not a part of the industry, right? So for her, well, actually, she is. She's in events. She works in events. But I mean, in terms of wedding photography and photography in general, like to her, like what matters to me doesn't matter to her. So
Yeah.
so she's always the straight and narrow and gives it to me straight, and which I need because as a whatever quote unquote creative, like you're just constantly thinking about things. Is this the right thing? What do you think about this? Should we do this? Should we that? And that's why again it goes back to working with an agency type, to curate everything for me, all the things in my brain, and then also my wife, there to basically say like, okay, no, you've gone through 3 different ideas in the past 2 days, like rein it in. So yes, definitely. And one thing what you were saying about like sorry, I can't remember exactly the words you used, but essentially what I was going to say was I think what's interesting too about doing a rebrand and really locking in is it gets you to really stay in your lane and
Yeah.
not look at what other people are doing, because you get so involved in what you're doing that it was actually quite freeing to like spend weeks not comparing my work or looking at my work, but rather having a goal and looking at my own work and then re-editing old weddings to kind of bring it up to where I want it to look and different things like that. And I will say one thing about the branding process that's also very interesting is that I'm different than you and you're different than the
Mm-hmm.
next person listening. And I think that's what the most is so amazing is that, again, it gets you to stay in your lane and not look at someone else and what they're doing and go, oh man, I wish this, because everything that my new brand is and my website is just me. Like,
Yeah.
what I basically said was, and I said this from the beginning was, I don't want to be a wedding photographer. I don't want to be a family photographer. I just want to be a photographer.
Oh.
And I'm a photographer, and my kind of like slogan, if you will, or whatever is, I care about documenting my family and my moments. So I want to document your family's moments and your wedding moments. So I really dove into that and really made that my anchor. It was like, I love photography and I see the value in photography and I believe in what photography can do. I have the stories of, photographing a wedding and mom has cancer and then mom passes away and they use one of my images at that basket. Like I have stories. I've been shooting weddings for, almost a decade or, so it's like you have all these stories, but it's like, how do you convey them over and over again without bashing people? And it's like, well, I just believe in it. I believe in photography. I love photography and I've made it my career. So, I don't want to be a fine art wedding photographer, or I don't want to be this, or I don't want to be a family lifestyle photographer. I just want to be a photographer that shoots weddings and shoots families. And if the client loves what I do and believes in what I do, then they'll hire me. And I've
Yeah.
just I've simplified that process in my brain to not run down one avenue and run down another and see someone's work and go, oh, I love what they're doing, I want to do that, but rather just document the way I document and do what I do. And hopefully, if I'm doing it right and, and staying in my lane, then clients will come that like what I'm doing. And I think it's a risky thing. It's a risky move, but I think it pays off, and it's a lot more fulfilling because then you're doing what you want to do, and you're happy, you're excited, you're creating work that, excites you rather than seeing images that other photographers are creating and trying to emulate that. And I mean, you can go on for hours about that subject alone, but I think just in the whole process of a rebrand and restructuring and, rephotographing and re-editing and doing all these things and changing, but keeping a common goal, and staying in your lane, I think it just really drives you to create work and, that you're proud of. And when you put out that website and you put out your logo and when I put out the video, I was proud of it. I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't, oh, what are people going to think? I was like, this is me. This is who I am. And so I'm proud of it. And it really it kept it simple for me and really, helped me, kind of get over that hump of, comparing my work and blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to go in circles, so I'll let you ask the next question.
No, dude, that was great. I loved everything that you just said. I think that there is something to be said about working with blinders on and concentrating just on what you're doing versus what other people are doing. I think that's the thing, that's the one thing that I think I've learned over time is to stop concentrating on other people's work. Because not only does that prevent me from creating, it also just really kind of will kind of mess with anyone really emotionally.
It's draining.
Yeah, dude, it's so draining. Like, it's gotten to the point to where I've almost have stopped following other wedding photographers. I want to see what other people are doing, and yes, I want to be a person of encouragement to my friends, and I want to make sure that that they, when they're doing good work, that it's recognized. Yeah. But I think so much of even what I was doing, and again, this is something that I've shared in the past, is concentrating more on the pats on the backs for my peers and the pats on the backs for my clients, and being able to be to free myself of that. And I think that's the thing is we get into these really weird, funky, where we end up chasing somebody else's goals. Do you know, and it happens by accident. I don't think anyone gets into this industry or gets into the creative business to chase what other people are chasing. I think it just kind of gradually happens. And sometimes you have to just be self-aware enough to kind of pull yourself out from what you're doing. But I do, totally. I have a question before we open things up. And I always like to end these conversations with this one question.
Okay.
So, Tyler, how would you like to be remembered when you are breathing your last breath and you're on your deathbed? If we are ever so lucky to get there, how would you like to be remembered?
That has nothing to do with branding, does it?
No, it doesn't. It has absolutely nothing to do with branding.
Oh, I just want to be remembered as a good human who did good things. And I mean, not on a grander scale, but more micro, just, a good influence on my kids. And I was a good husband and a good father and, hopefully grandfather. And, I think, and I hope that my legacy lives on with the images that I create, and not, yes, great for all the weddings that I've photographed, but more all the memories that I've captured of my family. And, I think that's what's so beautiful. I just finished my daughter's birth album. She was she was born in September, but I just finished it and sent it off to be printed. I sent off a year. Every year I do an album, and like I think those things, printing is lost. Hopefully there's a resurgence of it and it's slowly coming back. But for me, like to have those books and albums as my legacy, and for my kids to to review that and look back on that, and hopefully are thankful that I've done that. I think that's what I want to be remembered for. I mean, keep my memory going, right?
Yeah.
Keep the legacy on, keep going. I mean, we scream it to our clients, like print albums, print stands the test of time. But, if we don't do it for our own lives, I mean, those are just empty
words, right?
Empty statements and things that you just have on your website for the sake of having it on your website. But if you really believe in it, I think it's a lot easier to sell to your clients. But anyway,
dude,
now that's off topic from how I want to be remembered.
No, it's exactly on topic. And I always like to ask that question for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah.
One, it's sometimes when we are, like, we were talking about branding, and I asked you this off-topic question, really, because I think it's therapeutic to just get it out, because that is on brand. No matter how you look at things, what we do as creatives is important, and what we do as people is important, and it has to be on brand with what we do. It has to be part of our, like, even what you were saying, you were like, well, I think it's important to print your work. That's on brand. It's 100% on brand. And I just like to ask that question, but I would love to open the floor for like the last 5 to 10 minutes. If anybody has any questions, I know I can't invite you up. It's going to have to be Tyler, because I'm not he opened the room before I did. But definitely, if you guys want to ask a question, the only thing that I would like to remind you is that this room is being recorded, and that you just state your name, so that way it's not like a third voice up here with us as we're kind of chatting. And if you don't have a question, that's cool too. Oh, we got one.
Hey y'all, my name's Taylor. Just for a little bit of context. Hi guys. So just for a little context, I'm in my last week of working in corporate America, and I'm taking my business full time next Monday. And in that has been, rebranding. I really want to make sure that moving forward and trying to build this life for myself, that I can get the attention of my ideal clients. And so my question for you guys is, do you feel like it's always necessary to use your own name when choosing your business name? Or do you guys like the sort of kitschy, kind of fun, two clever words together and then adding photography to the end, or adding collective to the end?
Yeah. It's funny you say collective, because that was a big conversation I had with the agency that rebranded me. Is they really pushed me to stay away from Tyler Tindale and Co. or collective and things, because they're just trendy words. Mm-hmm. So they really pushed me to just stick with Tyler Tindale Photography, or photography company, keep it kind of timeless in that way. I mean, it's a difficult question, because you really just have to dig into what you want, right? Do you want to brand your company and business and you be the face of it, or do you want it to be more of a company where you can hire associates and change business directions? For me, my whole brand is based off of me and, who I am, who I'm married to. I have 2 kids, but I did that specifically because I'm focusing on family photography. So I want to be relatable. And with weddings, it was more, I want my clients to, basically know who I am before. But I mean, that was my choice. That was the avenue that I went down. But, there are companies out there that have company names, and they have associate photographers, and they keep things very professional, and very, business-like, and because they're going after a different set of clientele. So I think I think you just need to kind of sit down and really examine what is your ideal client and how you want to be portrayed, outwardly, and then kind of move from there, like start from, the ground and work your way up rather than just go, and start a logo and kind of all that things. Is that kind of...
Yeah, no, that answers my question so perfectly. And I really appreciate that insight, Tyler. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to ask this question.
Yeah, hey, Taylor, I will say this. When I first started photographing weddings before I rebranded to just my name, it was like Ridiculousness Photography. That was like my first URL. And I think that meant like I was trying to be cute with my last name and attach photography to it. And I think that although maybe some people would get it, a lot of people didn't. So it was definitely like one of those things with my rebrand to just go with my name because I'm the person behind the camera. And I think Tyler answered your question perfectly, is to really, instead of thinking more about the name, of thinking the reasons behind what you're doing and what your goals are, versus just what the name is. And I think you'll probably find your answer through asking yourself those questions.
That's so wonderful, Tim. Thank you so much. I feel like you had this room at just the right time for me personally, and I really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for coming up and asking.
I will add to that. Just candidly, like it, my first, when I started wedding photography, I don't know if you've been listening from the beginning, but it was based off of a rapper who had a song about skateboarding, and so I named my company K Push Studios. Lupe Fiasco had a song called Kick Push, and I thought it was clever. But that was the start, right? And I ran with that for about 4 years. But then I was like, my purpose and my direction changed. I didn't want to hide behind a company. I didn't, I had 2 videographers working for me and an associate photographer, and I literally wanted to just strip it down. I wanted to shoot smaller weddings. I wanted to, chase that dream of destination wedding photography. And a lot of that had to do with people wanting to know who they're hiring. And so I transitioned and I rebranded to TJ Tindale Photography. And then, I've worked under that name since 2016. And then, to change to Tyler Tindale was just to essentially just mature the brand that I've already created, because my life is different now. So I think, I hope that just kind of helps in, my story is my story. And I mean, you're going to create your own story. So I think basing your company off where you're at right now is a good way to start.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This insight has been so helpful for me.
Good.
Awesome.
Hey, Craig, do you have a question, brother?
Believe it or not, Taylor actually stole my thunder. I wasn't quick enough on the gun there, unfortunately. But I suppose more on that, my kind of opinion of it is that you don't necessarily need photography in your brand's name, because as soon as somebody clicks onto your social media page or your website portfolio, they can instantly tell what you're all about, and your work kind of speaks for itself. But like with what Tyler was saying, once he'd had photography in his name, he'd then matured it into just his name. So I suppose there can be a kind of, once you start to gain an audience with photography in your name, when people just see it written, it is that kind of thing where how will people know without clicking on your page? How will they know that you're a photographer? So I suppose there is a kind of fine line there.
I'm gonna speak on that, but Wendy, you've had your hand up, but you're not popping up. So I think you need to close your app and then come back into the conversation if you still have a question. And Craig, I totally agree with you. And I think what's interesting is when I developed my logo, I I specifically made an icon that doesn't explain anything. I have a badge that says Tyler Tindale Photography, established 2010, but everywhere I put my logo, it's always just going to be TT, because I don't want to always, have it out there that it's Tyler Tindale Photography, but rather just this clean, slick icon. And then if people are interested, they can explore further.
Yeah, totally agree with you. It's the same with having a camera or a lens in your logo as well. I feel, well, for me especially, there's so many photographers that do it, that want to be professional, and it's hard to kind of break out as a photographer if you've got a logo that looks the same as, or it looks very similar to everybody else. So it is quite difficult to do that, or even just creating a logo that's doing something creative with just your name. That works as not so much rebranding, but evolving your brand as a photographer, and just like you said, Tyler, just maturing it to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Wendy, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm very new to this, so my apologies for my blunder there.
No, it's okay.
I'm very similar to, I think it was Taylor who mentioned leaving corporate and going into photo full time. I left corporate as a corporate designer about a month ago. I've been doing photography for about 10 years, but now I really want to buckle down and build my own brand and focus on this full time. And I have a very nuts and bolts question. I'm just curious, if we did have someone rebrand at the level that yours has been done, Tyler, it's absolutely beautiful. Could you give us sort of a ballpark of what we would expect to pay for an overhaul like that? Is that a possible thing to answer without being?
Yeah,
I don't need your exact number. I was just curious.
No, that's fine. I paid $7,000.
Okay, that sounds. I was thinking around in that arena. I just wasn't sure if I was naive or not.
No, when I went into it, I thought, like 2,000 or 3,000. But when I got his quote, but it wasn't the logo. If I was just paying for a logo, but it was 4 or 5 meetings sitting down and kind of hashing out what I wanted my brand identity to be, and then building that brand foundation. Right. that took 4 or 5 months. And then once we kind of established exactly where, like, how I wanted my, business and company to be, and how I wanted to move forward, then we rolled out logos. And I mean, logos only took 3 weeks, because when you have your foundation dialed in, it's like everything else comes pretty naturally and quickly. I think it's doing the dirty work of kind of digging into yourself and working out all the things that you want out of a brand and out of your brand, and then kind of moving forward in that way. But you don't have to, like, this was a decision that I made, and I want to make that like really clear. Like, this was what I needed to do for my business. Being in the industry for quite some time, I really needed an overhaul and a refresh and just a change of mind and a change of attitude. So this was the way that I felt was right for me to really dive in and invest with somebody. But everyone has a different story and a different, financial opportunity. So please don't take it as you have to spend $5,000, $10,000. You got to do it the way that it works for you.
Right. So you took a holistic approach and covered everything involved in your brand, including yourself and your vision. And I get it. That's awesome. Thank you so much. It's absolutely beautiful. I took a look at it, and I'm really impressed. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it. And Daria, did you have a question? Is it Daria? Daria?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I have a question because my story is a little bit different. I'm a chocolate lover from many years ago. So we built together with my husband in Poland small bakery, and I started to take a photo of our products, and it's how started, I think. And now I feel that I could try to take a photo of other things, not only products. I also started to make some photo of child and this kind of thing, and I think it's so I think it's good, but I'm thinking how to change the point of view, because I built a little bit the knowledge about my sweet product, but now maybe there is any option to go for with the photo. I don't know how. Maybe you have any idea how to do this, because I think I was thinking that maybe there will be some opportunity that somebody will ask me to do the same of photo, because everybody are thinking that okay, your photo are great and good and this is really really great, but nothing happened until today. So I don't know how to start. Is the main question.
Have you created, like, are you still kind of working as a, I know you have the bakery and you're photographing the products, but have you kind of established yourself outwardly to other people as a photographer that would document babies and families and different things like that?
No, at this moment, not.
So I think that's a good place to start. I think maybe building a small website or, an Instagram page like dedicated to that work will then, it's kind of that classic saying, show what you want to shoot and shoot what you want to show. So if you want to document, families and babies and other work, start showing that type of work and kind of going after it, exploring, reaching out to friends and different, family and photographing them and kind of building up a portfolio that you can then put out to the world and start a brand that way.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Tyler just said. There are a couple of different things that you could do, I think, just to get started. One of those things is doing exactly what Tyler said. And I think the other thing that you could also do is, Craigslist was my friend when I was first starting out, going into the gigs section, and there are people who are looking for photographers there. They're never really high priced gigs, but if you're just cutting your teeth, that might be a place where you can practice and just kind of get better at. And I definitely agree with just reaching out to cousins, aunts, siblings, and photographing them as much as you can to kind of build up your portfolio. The people don't need to know that they're related to you, but that is definitely a way to kind of get started in cutting your teeth, so that at least you have work to show besides just shooting the work that you're currently photographing.
I think it's a good point. It's true, I never mentioned that it wasn't strong mentioned that those photos are mine and this is fully my work. This is the first thing, and the second is I agree that I never said that I'm doing I'm doing the photo also, because it is only about chocolate. Okay, thank you very much.
No worries. Hey Tyler, so I do have to run, so I'm gonna stop on my end, but I do want to say this. I know Virginia has a question But I want to say this. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, brother. I appreciate it. I will drop you a DM here shortly in the next couple of minutes. And I just wanted to say thanks again. And thanks again to everyone who's listening. Tyler's going to continue the room. So if you guys need any questions answered, he is so knowledgeable and he is such a great person. And he is just an overall rad dude. I would completely raise your hand, even if it's something mundane, and Tyler will go ahead and answer it for you.